Let's say someone sends you a digitally signed message or document, or they use their identity credential to log into your website or to purchase something from you. How do you know whether you can rely upon that identity? How do you know the signer isn't an imposter? To answer that, we must start with the question, what is identity? Well, we know that a proper identity is represented by a digital identity certificate. And we know that identity is proven when the person identified by the certificate demonstrates that he or she has control of the private key that goes with the certificate. So when someone signs a message or document or authenticates to your website with that private key, all's cool, right? You can trust that ID, right? Not so fast. First of all, do you know how they got that certificate? That is, do you know how they were enrolled? Anyone can get an identity certificate from any of a number of certification authorities attesting that, for example, they're Abraham Lincoln. That certification authority's root certificate will in all probability be in your computer, so your computer will give you a thumbs up on that identity. Yes, your computer will tell you can trust that signature because the private key goes with the public key that we have signed. The public key that they've recklessly signed, that is. Yes, more inauthenticity. What you need is a way for your computer to look at a digital signature or a response to a challenge and tell you that identity may be relied upon to the following extent: 16 on a scale of 72. In other words, trust it for casual social networking purposes among adults, but don't trust it for any matters involving money or confidential information. Let's get back to the question, what is identity? Here is the definition of identity as it appears in my book entitled Identity Quality. Identity is the mapping of a natural person to a digital representation of that natural person, such that the representation is unique in its namespace and may be asserted and attested for purposes of accountability, facilitation of information transfer, communication, transactions, participation in community, and organizational or business processes. We use the term natural person because in the U.S. and some other jurisdictions, a person can be a corporation, partnership, or trust. Go figure. Some PKI folks will note that identity certificates can also refer to objects, to which we Authenticity Alliance folks respond, not in our version of PKI they don't. Objects in our world can have object certificates, provided those object certificates are bound to real people holding real identity certificates. The identity infrastructure and quiet enjoyment infrastructure of which it is part adhere to technical standards such as the X509 certificate standard and many others. But where we believe a standard allows or accommodates inauthenticity, we go our own way. For example, the notion that all of the information relevant to the reliability of the certificate is in the certificate itself is unworkable. The authenticity infrastructure's credential system starts with your foundational certificate. That's preferably a digital birth certificate, but a ValID foundational certificate can also serve this role. The information in the foundational certificate consists of the immutable information that is found in your paper birth certificate. Under normal circumstances, that information never changes, and, like the paper birth certificate, the foundational certificate and its private key are seldom used. Your foundational certificate's private key sits in your home safe or bank deposit box, used only when you need to sign a certificate signing request for a utility certificate or a device certificate, the credentials you'll use on a day-to-day basis. Your utility and device certificates have normal expirations, and if compromised, they may be revoked with a manageable level of hassle and disruption. Because you can always go back to your foundational certificate's private key to sign a new certificate signing request. So you have a permanent foundational certificate as well as transitory utility and device certificates, and perhaps an encryption certificate as well. That's still not the end of the credential story. Even the attributes of a transitory certificate change during the time it's valid. The reliability of a given credential is affected by a number of things. 8 things to be exact. A record is needed that is associated with the credential and that lets your relying parties know how reliable that credential is in each of those 8 metrics or dimensions of identity quality. And that's what the Identity Quality Assurance Measurement System of the Authenticity Infrastructure is all about. While the underlying foundational identity certificate attests to information that doesn't change, and the utility and device certificates seldom change, the corresponding IDQA score is subject to continual update. So that when someone sends you a signed message or file, or when you meet someone in an online professional or social network, you have a means of knowing the extent to which you can rely upon their claimed identity as represented by their certificate. Initial IDQA scores and updates to them are digitally signed by enrollment officers. Identity Quality Assurance provides a way of knowing that an identity assertion is appropriate as measured in each of 8 categories for a particular relying party or application. An IDQA score is the sum of 8 digits, with each digit in the range of 0 to 9. Each of the 8 dimensions of identity quality is measured using a scale of 0 to 9, with 0 being the lowest rating in a particular dimension. Thus, the highest quality ID will carry a score of 72. With that one, you can buy an office building on another continent while sitting in your den. This quantification of identity quality answers concerns of enterprises that need to know the costs and benefits of a particular enrollment program. A note about face-to-face enrollments, which I've noted involve an oath and affidavit. In executing an affidavit, many jurisdictions offer the choice of an oath or affirmation, the difference being that an oath invokes a supreme being. Some jurisdictions will not honor an affidavit that was executed using an affirmation-based notarial procedure, and so we use the oath instead of an affirmation. Also, we believe that those who are empowered to apply public authority ought to acknowledge a higher authority. If you claim not to believe in a supreme being, you can swear an oath to that which created me. The phrase, "that which created me," can refer to nothing more than an evolutionary process, if that fits your belief. That should also work for adherents of faiths that prohibit the invoking of the name of God in such procedures. Going back to the original question, if someone sends you a digitally signed message or document, or they use their identity credential to log into your website or purchase something from you, how do you know whether you can rely upon that identity? How do you know the signer isn't an imposter? If the credential complies with the standards of the authenticity infrastructure, you'll simply click on the icon that represents the person, as in this illustration. Now here's something we think is really special. Look at that representation of identity. Note that it gives an IDQA score, and nothing else, not even the name or gender of the subject. In other words, this identity is reliable to the score of 43 out of a possible 72. If you do rely upon it and something goes wrong, that person is accountable, even though you don't know their name or gender, or what they look like, or where they live. Now, of course, we don't recommend entering into a substantial contract with someone without at least knowing their name. On the other hand, for years, people have been buying and selling things on eBay while knowing nothing about each other but some reputational scores. With digital certificates backing up those reputational scores, we have something truly reliable, while at the same time preserving privacy and even anonymity. And while giving people a chance to license the use of personal information to each other with the protections of copyright and secrecy law. eBay had to start somewhere. Relying upon their reputational scores when they first came out required more of a leap of faith than such reliance requires today. But we're still not done with the personal privacy part of the authenticity infrastructure. That's because big companies with big databases and big data mining technologies don't need your name or social security number or any other single index in order to track your every move. And why do they want to track your every move? Partly it's to understand your habits and preferences and financial status in order to present products and services and political agendas that you're likely to respond to. But that's not all. That's what they say they're interested in, but the real agenda of some organizations is far more insidious. A look at Stanford University's Persuasive Technology Lab reveals the other reason why big organizations want to track you: to manipulate your perceptions. If you're like most people, you're probably susceptible to this because you don't think it can be done. You know when people are trying to manipulate your perceptions, and so you don't fall for it, right? Well, if you've never been fooled by a stage magician, congratulations. You are less vulnerable than the rest of us. But forgive me for not being convinced. Most of us have been fooled by the most elementary sleight of hand tricks. Certainly I have. And all of us form our opinions and outlook on life based upon the information that is presented to us by friends, family, community, and media. So if a captologist wants your soul, he doesn't need your name or social security. He just needs to know the attributes that identify you. He finds those attributes in the trail of finger steps and unique identifiers you leave in your computer or phone and around the web. So let's mess up that trail of finger steps, shall we? We'll show how the personal information ownership infrastructure lets you do that. But first we need to protect your more formal personal information assets. To protect both forms of your personal information assets, your formal information and that which is assembled from your finger steps, we need to look at how it's made vulnerable. Click on the video entitled Breaking and Entering. You can learn more about our patent-pending IDQA system in my book entitled Identity Quality. Or for a brief overview of the meaning of each of the 8 digits, tune in to the video entitled The 8 Dimensions of Identity Quality.